This is the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We chat about software development for mobile, HDTV, wearables, robotics, user experience, mentoring, and everything related to building products and services for the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond. Your hosts today are myself, Eric Isaacson. I'm a UX engineer at 3Pillar Global, and Christian Smith, open source developer and startup enthusiast. So this is episode number 4, Rise of the Backend As A Service, static application hosting, and all things Firebase. And we have with us today Ossama Alami, VP of Developer Happiness at Firebase. Ossama leads developer relations, support, and developer marketing at Firebase. So Firebase is a backend that lets developers store and sync data in real time. Ossama has dedicated himself to empowering developers and ensuring Firebase remains a force of good in the developer community. So last week we had Matt Krieger, a developer evangelist, on from GoInstant, which was an incredible backend as a service. So since that episode has aired, GoInstant has announced that it will no longer be available to its users as of the end of August in 2014. So this is pretty significant. It saddens me to see this because they have such a great open culture and there's amazing people behind that product, and they're very dedicated to open source and building out great services. Fortunately, the technology is most likely going to be rolled back into its parent company, Salesforce. But it will no longer be available to us as an open source backend as a service. No one's data is being held hostage. There's a migration process that's easy and fast, so if you haven't done it already, you can just go to their site and read the blog, and it'll explain what you need to do. But Christian talks about this with our guest today, Ossama, a little bit later, and there's some interesting discussion on it. But to summarize the thoughts is, keep this in mind. Can a XaaS, meaning a backend as a service, a software as a service, whatever, be a viable dependency for our applications, given that these services are so vulnerable to acquisition by larger companies? So, as far as I know, Firebase was one of the pioneers to backend as a service. For those who aren't familiar, Ossama, if you don't mind, maybe you could just describe the value of the development stack and what it provides application developers.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. First, Eric and Christian, let me say thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. So Firebase, as you said, is a backend as a service. Simply, our core product is a real-time database and an API that lets developers store and sync data in real time across all their clients, be it web or mobile. In addition to this, we have a couple products that help developers build applications beyond our backend. One is simple integration with social login providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, those auth providers. We have a user management API where developers can use us to manage email and password login from their users. And then we recently launched Firebase Hosting, which is a static asset hosting product. We're building this real-time infrastructure that lets all developers build interactive and collaborative applications and build apps that are in real time. We're trying to make this infrastructure that bigger engineering companies with large engineering staff and ops staff like Google and Facebook, this real-time infrastructure that they have available to all developers who may not have the resources to set up and maintain this sort of infrastructure.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting you bring that up. I feel like with big players out there like Google and Amazon, it's a hard space to get into, and it's pretty impressive that you guys are doing this. Why would a developer choose the Firebase hosting? Is it mostly the cost, or is it scalability, or?
Hosting specifically, I think we really look we looked at what is the best practice in the hosting space when hosting static assets. And generally, as a company, we believe that web applications are moving from mostly server-rendered pages to mostly thick clients through the use of JavaScript frameworks like Angular or Ember. And so when we're looking at hosting these sorts of applications, we looked at what sort of things make a great hosting product for developers, and it boils down to one, it's CDN backed, so it's fast. Two, it's secure by default. So additionally, we take the pain of sort of acquiring an SSL cert and installing an SSL cert and maintaining that server. If you use Firebase Hosting with a custom domain, we take care of acquiring that cert on your behalf and installing it. And three, that it supports custom domains easily. And four, that it's very easy for a developer to set up, as well as it has one command deploys and one-click rollbacks. We certainly have developers that are using Firebase Hosting and not using the Firebase database, and we have obviously developers doing the other way around. But it's really for developers who are using the real-time database. It's a great add-on, and we've actually included it into all our plans without increasing any of the cost.
That's awesome. Being mostly front-end development that I do, I love the static applications. I was just telling Christian last week that we were in this hackathon, Static Showdown, and we had a great time, and I learned a lot about the different services that you could use, and we used Firebase for our backend.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We did an Angular app with three-way binding. I actually used the Firebase to build an app that I have existing, the Firebase Hosting, I should say, and it took like 2 minutes, like 2.5 minutes to get everything up and running. That includes install time and everything. How are developers typically using Firebase? How do you see this changing over time as far as the hosting goes and the integration pieces with the backend?
Sure. I'll start with Firebase Hosting. We decided to build Firebase Hosting because we had developers who used Firebase, the database, and enjoyed and appreciated not having to run any server code or write any server code or manage any servers. But we got these requests of, now that I've built my application, I need a place to host it. And so we had developers who ultimately built everything on Firebase, but had to go to another provider to get a web hosting product. And generally, these the range of quality of hosting products certainly runs the gamut. But the beautiful thing about focusing purely on static asset hosting is that it is content that by definition is very cacheable. We can easily deploy a developer's content over CDN, and then as soon as the developer updates a new version of the site, we take care of sort of expiring the cache on the CDN in seconds, so that the content is served in real time. Generally, though, I'm not going to pretend that there isn't a need for a server. In some cases, there are certainly servers that you may need server to do some backend processing, or you may need a server to connect to another service. We find that developers are using Firebase both as the backend, purely the backend for their application, but also to power a portion of their application, perhaps a portion that needs some real-time collaborative features. And we have developers that certainly connect the Firebase database to a server process to do some sort of either backend processing or auditing or managing of that data. And for example, we have a Node.js Firebase client that we make available for developers who are building Node.js apps.
Yeah, like I said, I use the tool for the Node CLI tools that you have. Is that different than the Node platform that you're talking about?
Yeah, the command line interface is a simple way for developers to hook into Firebase Hosting. It lets them do a number of things. One, the obvious is deploy their website to Firebase Hosting using a simple Firebase deploy command. But we also have in there a bootstrap feature. So if you're building a new application and you want to pull from one of our templates, if you run Firebase Bootstrap in your command line, it'll let you choose sort of whether you want an Angular example app or a chat example app or whatever the case may be, and gets you up and running very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of front-end developers love those generators.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as like developers listening, if they want to get involved and up and running with Firebase Host, do you think it's best to just go straight to the docs, or do you think that there's a better path?
No, I mean, the docs are a great starting point. You can go to firebase.com/hosting.html, and that's sort of the starting point for hosting, or you can just go to firebase.com/docs and find it there. It is really, really very simple. All you need to do is sign up for a Firebase account. Any Firebase account, even the free ones, comes with a hosting. You then need to download or just install the command line interface. If you already have npm on your machine, it's npm install firebase-tools. And once you have that set up, you can run Firebase init in the command line, and it'll set up a directory, get uploaded to hosting. I'll walk you through that. And then Firebase deploy, and you'll have deployed your application to a subdomain on firebaseapp.com. If you wanted to add a custom domain, you can certainly do that by logging into our dashboard and walking through the process there. It's pretty simple. You modify some things on your name server, and it happens pretty quickly. About over 24 hours, we will have provisioned an SSL cert for you and installed it, and you'll be up and running on your custom domain, secured and distributed over a CDN.
Now, is that for only the paid accounts, or is that for the free ones as well?
The free accounts get access to deploying on firebaseapp.com. All the paid accounts get the additional feature of being able to deploy a custom domain.
That makes sense. It's like, is there an IRC channel or any Stack Overflows, or I think there was a Stack Overflow channel that Christian found.
Definitely. We love Stack Overflow. We're developers ourselves. So there's a Firebase tag on Stack Overflow. You actually see our logo in there. Mm-hmm. And we're pretty active on there, the whole engineering team and support engineers. We are also on the Firebase channel on Freenode and the IRC. We have a bunch of GitHub open source projects. You can find us there. We're pretty active on GitHub. And we have a Google group called Firebase Talk, which has a lot of Firebase developers on there chatting about the product and chatting about how to build great applications. And then for all developers, we also have a support email, support@firebase.com. If they run into any problems that they don't want to ask on those channels, they can certainly email us.
Nice. So it's SSL by default, right? Which is great.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about the providers where you have, for the backend in particular, which integrates with the hosting, I believe, through the Firebase.json configuration, right?
Yeah, the Firebase.json is a file that sits in your project that tells hosting where to deploy your content. Mm-hmm. It also has some features in it that affect the real-time database. For example, you can deploy security rules for the database through the command line interface through that Firebase.json file. But we have people who use the hosting product on its own, and certainly people who use the database on its own.
Yeah, I know that the rules are mostly for the backend and not the hosting, but I did for my own knowledge, I did want to know, like, are those rules like something like what OWASP would provide, like something like standardized rules, so one of the issues that I'm thinking of is like if you have cross origin requests, that could be a problem. It's easily fixed with changing headers and adjusting some things, but is that something that needs to be thought about, as far as that?
Not really. Firebase hosting is it's all public, so anything you deploy to Firebase hosting is accessible over the web. There isn't any authentication that sort of restricts access to a portion of your site. The security rules themselves are enforced on access to the Firebase database, and those are pretty comprehensive. So they're not, to my knowledge, they're not based on any other sort of standard, but they are simply like JavaScript rules that are enforced by our real-time servers whenever somebody's accessing Firebase data. So you can restrict access to a certain node to logged in users, or prevent writes on a certain node to only administrative users, or whatever your security requirements are, you can enforce them through the security rules for the database.
That's awesome to hear, actually, because I think that's a concern, at least for me. Like if I'm looking into products to build with, that I want to make sure that there's that security layer in there, even if it's handled by someone else, as long as it's there.
Of course. Yeah, it's a key feature of the product. Firebase, the database, is very easy to get started with, but once you're ready to deploy a production application, you certainly want to look into what are the appropriate security rules for your application. And obviously, we enforce these on the server because you don't want any sort of only client-side validation when altering your data.
Yeah, and if I'm I am a developer, right? But if I'm a team lead, and I want to use your hosting services, how do you guys compare to some other competitors like divshot.io? Like, how is the static hosting different from those solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a couple of features that for a static asset hosting provider, I don't think anybody else has the combination of all these features. Mm-hmm. So one is, obviously, we support a custom domain. Two is we support SSL on that custom domain. To my knowledge, sort of in the landscape of static ASIC hosts, we're the only one that supports SSL on a custom domain where it is not SNI only. SNI is server name indication, I think. It's like a recent SSL advancement that lets sort of browsers tell, I don't know the specific details on it, but it's only supported by around 85% of internet-connected devices, which means that around 15% of users, particularly if they're on an older device, won't be able to securely connect to a site that uses SNI-only SSL. We do automated SSL cert provisioning, which is, again, not anything that other people do. We support naked domains, which is not typical. That means you can access your site on firebase.com instead of www.firebase.com. It will work on that. Mm-hmm. We have CDN-backed hosting, one-step deploys, and one-click rollbacks.
I didn't see in the tools either, and maybe I missed it though. Is there a concept of environments like development, staging, production?
Not currently. We do have developers who basically set up, two Firebases, one for staging, one for production. or more. But the tools themselves don't support a differentiation between staging and different environments. Although that is a feature request that we get, and we're still investing in improving Firebase hosting.
And if you have like a CI integration, continuous, like a continuous integration rather, is that something you guys are looking into with those environments, like using something like Travis or something?
Definitely. We are looking into, we listen to our users and our developers and on what they need. This was the first release of Firebase hosting, but it's certainly something we're working currently on improving.
One thing I didn't see was routing and clean URLs. So I know that if you go to index.html or something like that, it'll render, right? But if you had something like /index, is there a way to set that up in the configuration, or is that a feature request?
That is something that we're currently working on that should be out very shortly. Both redirects, internal rewrites, as well as control over cache headers. Those are all coming out soon.
Very nice.
So yeah, we knew that we needed to build that into the hosting products. So we were quickly working on that when we launched the first version.
Yeah, and for somebody like me who uses NPM and Bower and stuff like that all the time, the CLI tools are a no-brainer for me to use those. But not everyone will want to use them, right? Sometimes, on Windows you're forced into certain GUIs or other things like that. At least it's been my experience. I don't know if that's true across the board. But do you guys feel like you might take that and turn it into some RESTful API that, like if let's say I have an application and I need to speak to a sub application that I have on Firebase, I need to go back and forth with it. I want to push, promote. Let's say I built a CI application or something, just as a poor example. I want to integrate with the hosting. Is there a RESTful API plan for something like that?
There isn't currently, but we do get this feature request pretty often. Not only integration between these sorts of tools, but also quite a few people want to store things like user-generated content programmatically in Firebase hosting. So this is another feature that we're investigating currently.
Before you were with Firebase, you were with Google. You were helping guide the whole development for Glass innovation, Chromecast. So given your history with these innovative technologies, do you see Firebase creating like API integration specifically, or catered SDKs or APIs for wearables or non-traditional app development?
Definitely. I think sort of the nature of these devices, Internet of Things and wearable devices, and sort of the trend in this space is that they need APIs, or they work well when they're connected in real time, meaning that you don't have to pull the device or a service to get updates about the state of maybe a sensor in your home. These devices work really well when connected to a simple to use real-time API. So we see Firebase as actually like a very good fit for Internet of Things and connected devices, because really what you want with these devices is a very simple way to interact with them and a simple way to get data back and forth from them. So we're definitely looking at building out specific features for connected devices like this, but we also work currently with our current SDKs with a number of these devices, be they Android powered or otherwise.
So that's exciting. I think that I totally agree. I'm glad to hear that, as far as because the real time aspect really stands out to me with that. I could definitely see that. as far as like, I don't even know if this is a thing, but as far as like support on the hosting for like something, like other different types of protocols like HTTP2 or Speedy, do you guys even need to implement that, or does that happen like on some other part of the application?
That's a good question. I think Speedy is currently only supported by Chrome right now. So it's not something that we've looked into.
I think Internet Explorer 11 too, but yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. It's not something we currently looked into, but we are backed by a very fast CDN, so it sort of mitigates some of the need for this stuff. But as these technologies mature, certainly our goal with hosting, and in fact with all of our products, is to be best in class product for that specific space. So if static asset hosting, if like the right way to build a static asset hosting product is to implement these features, and we'll certainly look into implementing them.
Yeah, because I may be wrong. My understanding of how HTTP2 is going to be implemented, or is implemented now, is that it makes it more optimized for static assets, like if you have lots of smaller requests. So you wouldn't have to do the concatenation tooling that we do with all the front-end assets as much. So I was just wondering how that might affect it. It's kind of why I asked that question.
It's a good question. Truly, I don't know the details on that.
Neither do I. So
first, I have to say we really enjoyed using Firebase in that hackathon. You guys have done a great job on your APIs and on your tooling and everything. It just kind of works the way that you would expect it to. I mean, to the point that a lot of things were so much easier, and I was trying to make them harder, and I had to just stop and go back and say, wait, all I have to do is this.
Awesome.
And that was really really enjoyable, and I kind of aspire in my own work to reach that level of user friendliness. So good work, guys. Awesome.
Thank you very much. That's very rewarding to hear you say that. So,
yeah. So yeah, it's really hard to achieve that level of usability and simplicity. So good stuff. One thing that I noticed as I was looking through how Firebase works and everything, seems like your sessions actually support offline access. So they're cached in the browser or somewhere, like in local storage or something. And so everybody thinks of Firebase as being this real-time thing, but I mean, hypothetically, does it support offline access as well? The sessions do, but is there anything else you're doing to make it easy to build offline apps that would sync up later?
Yeah, so I think I'm glad you asked that question. Where we see sort of these thick clients going and connected applications and going is like when I think about what I want in a app, I want, I think, three things. One is that it's fast and that it's usable. It has a great user experience, like it draws me in and doesn't do anything unexpected. Two, that data is loaded and served in real time when I'm connected, so I don't have to like pull to refresh or click a refresh button. And three is that it works offline. And sort of number two, like Firebase certainly handles very well. And number three is something that we think is a core feature of our product as well. Building applications that work seamlessly offline is not that easy. Currently, what we do is if you are connected, if you load an application, you're connected, and you lose connection to the internet, be it on your Android or iOS or web, Firebase will continue to work, so you can store data to the local cache. Your application won't crash. It'll continue to work. Obviously, you won't be receiving updates, but Firebase doesn't depend on a network connection in that case. For our iOS SDK, we have disk persistence, which is a feature that's in beta in iOS and coming soon to our other SDKs, which will actually allow you to, as a developer, ask for the data that you want locally cached ahead of time, and then that data will still be there. So we actually have thought a lot about how to handle offline features in our platform. I know we're becoming like a more and more connected world, but as we become more and more connected, we rely on these applications that are connected more and more. And when we are inevitably disconnected from the internet, like most of the time, these things just break. And we don't think that should be the case. So,
that's so true. I mean,
I'm glad you asked about offline support because we really.
Yeah, it's really important for a hillbilly like me too. I live out in the sticks, and we don't have great cell coverage, or sometimes the internet will go out for a day at a time or something. So, it's something I think about a lot. Great to see that you're making that easier. So, obviously, you guys are out to make real-time backend something that we can all take for granted as developers, and that's a great thing. But for the alpha nerds out there, you want to know what's under the hood. How does this thing work? So first off, is Firebase communicating with WebSockets with the clients?
Yeah, I think your impression of how it works is right. We do what's appropriate for the platform. So on the web, what we do is the Firebase client will attempt to open a WebSocket connection to the Firebase real-time servers. If that fails for whatever reason, be it WebSockets are blocked on some corporate network, or it's an older version of a browser that doesn't support WebSockets, or for whatever reason, if that connection can't be established, the Firebase JavaScript client will use a long pole, use a hanging get, essentially, to ensure real-time capability with Firebase. On other platforms like Android and iOS, we use sockets, whatever's appropriate to that platform.
Awesome. So another question: how do you deal with conflicts? Let's say you have a whole bunch of users hitting the same piece of data at the same time. What does Firebase do to help out handling conflict mitigation? Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, conflict mitigation is a hard problem. But for many developers, in some cases, they don't necessarily care about who wins. So we offer sort of two options for developers. One, if it doesn't matter who wins, the developer just can use a set, and how sets work are they're just last write wins. So for example, if client A and client B are both offline and then later connect to Firebase, if client A connects first, their set will be written to Firebase. But when client B connects, if they're writing to the same node, their set will then get written to Firebase, and so client B will ultimately win. If you do need to ensure some sort of consistency through like conflict merge resolution, we have this concept called transaction. And transaction has a built-in conflict resolution. So in our example where we have client A and client B, client A connects first. Since there isn't a conflict at that time, their write gets written to Firebase. When client B connects, they will try a transaction and it will fail because A has already written and the data has changed. We provide an update function that a developer can write. This will automatically be run the second time with the new data that A wrote, so that B can take the appropriate action on that data and decide whether it's appropriate to write or not.
Stop reading my mind. That was my next question.
So again, if you don't care who wins, use stat. If you need to ensure some sort of consistency, a developer can use transaction.
That's great. That's great to know you support both. Another thing, Firebase has kind of unique data model where it's almost like a nested key value store where each level in the tree behaves kind of like a collection. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen that anywhere else. It takes a minute to get used to, but once you do, it's really easy to work with. But what's going on in my mind is the gears are spinning and wondering, how is that implemented? Do you have some kind of low-level key value store in the back? Is it something that you rolled in-house, or is there something like Hadoop or HBase behind it that's very well known?
Yeah. So, we believe this data model that we've exposed is the right way to build, modern applications that scale well. Infrastructure side on our end, there isn't a lot that I can talk to. Truthfully, some of it is over my head in terms of some of the work that the engineering team here has done. There's a lot of custom Scala code involved in building out the Firebase real-time database and the Firebase real-time service. And I know we use certainly some open source projects as part of our infrastructure. But there isn't a lot that I can really tell you about the underpinnings of our service. Sorry.
Okay, so
understandable.
Yeah, that probably kills my next question, but
Nice.
But that's okay. I mean, I understand you guys gotta keep some secrets, at least for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. One, it's like our infrastructure is certainly changing, and two, like some of this stuff I just don't. I'm not an expert on, so I don't feel comfortable making authoritative statements on it.
Okay, fair enough. So let's step back a little bit. Can you give us some examples of maybe some of the more innovative things your customers have built? And is there anyone that's pushing your limits really in terms of the scale that they're operating at?
Our developers, consistently amaze us with what they're building. We currently have over 75,000 registered developers, and so we've seen sort of a wide range of applications built on us. Some of the larger names you might have heard of are Twitch, which uses Firebase to, I think, power some features of their service, which streams games to audiences.
Wow.
Citrix uses us in their, I think, GoToMeeting product for the web, and in a iOS collaborative drawing app. CBS uses us to power, I think, the chat rooms for Big Brother on the web. Warby Parker, the glasses company, actually uses us for a fun use case. They have a store, I believe it's in New York, where customers can come in, and when they select a pair of glasses, those glasses are shipped up from their basement or some storage space using pneumatic tubes, and Firebase actually powers the pneumatic tubes, as in when a sales rep or a customer picks a pair of glasses, it tells the service which over Firebase, which then sends a pneumatic tube up. And then a recent customer is Coffee Meets Bagel, which is like a new dating app, and they use us to power some of the real-time features in their app. Overall, we have about, on any given time, around 1 million concurrent users across all of our applications, and that number is growing. So we've certainly been able to scale quite comfortably with our customers as they scale.
Wow, that's impressive. Especially, you guys haven't been around that long. I mean, we've been working on this since what, 2010, is it?
So a bit of the history of the company, it was founded in 2012.
Oh, okay.
The sort of predecessor was this company called Envolve, which actually was a real-time chat application. Our founders built that out and found that customers were using Involve for doing things like syncing game state and leaderboards, and basically abusing the chat system because of its real-time nature to send other data across the wire. And so they thought that this would actually be a very interesting space to go into for developers building out a real-time infrastructure and like a big need. So Firebase grew out of that. It grew out of Involve, although all the code is essentially unique to Firebase.
That brings up an interesting point, though. Like, what happens when we start using technologies like WebRTC that have to peer-to-peer data transfer? Do you think that would change the way the Firebase is working, or speed it up even?
I think as these things become more prevalent and standardized, it will certainly, improve the landscape for real-time apps. I mean, we want to see, I want to see apps built this way, right? I think the things I said earlier, I want apps that are real-time, I want apps that work offline, and I want apps that are good. Basically, apps that compute locally, right? I want them to be responsive. I want them to have a good user experience. So I think as these technologies mature, we'll see more apps like this, and that's something that we're looking forward to.
Are there? This might be a question you don't want to answer, but every tool.
What a great way to preface the question.
every
Sorry,
tool.
I'm having trouble hearing you. But sorry.
Every tool has things that it excels at and things that it's not a great fit for, and I wonder if you guys have thought about this and if you have a good answer for it. What would be the kind of things that you wouldn't want to build with Firebase? Is there anything that you can think of?
I think, what we've seen is that people use us sort of across the board in a bunch of different use cases. We excel right now. I mentioned Internet of Things, but like collaboration tools, social, mobile apps, these are all things that we excel at. We have developers that use Firebase purely as their entire backend, but we also have developers that use Firebase to power some real-time features of their app or service. So it really runs the range, but there are obviously things that Firebase doesn't do. Like if you want to run an app reduce on huge sets of data, or want to do large data analysis outside of serving content to your users and data to your users, then as a developer you'd want to look at the services that do that, but they can certainly complement Firebase depending on what your use case is.
For example, search. I think I read something about Elasticsearch Integration. You got a little node module out there somewhere that'll feed stuff into an Elasticsearch river or something like that.
Yeah, we do have an Elasticsearch integration that we made.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. So other thing that I almost forgot to ask this one. I saw this and was kind of blown away. I thought it was really cool that you guys are doing this. You have open data sets. So you guys maintain and publish these real-time data sets like weather and earthquake information, seismic data or something. Is that what it is? Airline delays. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the open data set sort of grew out of the nice thing about the nature of this data and the data sets that we have is that it is data that changes in, very frequently. It is real-time data, like transit information, as in where is the bus at this specific moment. And so this data is available through other sources, but not in something that is quite as easy to use as an API that is by its nature built for real-time data sets. The data sets themselves sort of grew out of a desire to give back to the developer community B, because we are kind of data nerds here ourselves, and like we want to see cool visualizations of this data built, and we think that this data like can certainly help improve the world that we live in if we make it available in a easy to consume way. So right now we have transit data for a bunch of cities in the US, and that's like public transit information. Earthquake data provided by USGS for global earthquakes as they happen. Airport delay data in the US, weather data, cryptocurrency exchange rates against the US dollar for Bitcoin and Litecoin. And I truthfully don't know if it's Doggy Coin or Dogecoin, but Doge.
Sad to say, I know.
Thank you. I feel like that's a contentious topic, but
such coinage.
Such coinage. And we're adding more data sets. We're trying to add like a data set every 2 weeks or so. So we're constantly looking for new and interesting data sets that we can add to our open data sets. As a developer, you don't have to sign up for Firebase to use them. You could just use the data sets as is. Obviously, like there's an advantage to us in addition to just like making this data available because we really want to see what's built with it, but we also expose developers to using our API.
Any thoughts about maybe subscription data sets, like premium stuff? Like for example, if you ever worked on financial stuff and dealt with Bloomberg, you know what a horrific pain in the posterior it is to code against their APIs. I mean, and they're crazy expensive, and armies of lawyers and everything else. Any thoughts about simplifying access to public data like that?
Currently, we're sort of looking at data sets where we can either partner with a company or a organization that provides that data, or where we can redistribute data because it's public to begin with, so there are no sort of restrictions on redistributing it. Ultimately, we're excited about open data, but our core product is the backend as a service features we provide to developers. So we're not really looking at adding any sort of premium features to the open data sets right now. We're looking to distribute publicly available data in an easier, more accessible way.
Awesome. It is a great feature that you guys have, and I was really surprised to see it, and made me kind of happy to think that you could just wire your stuff up to that and go.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of psyched you're doing it every 2 weeks too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now you're going to hold me to that promise.
Every 2-ish weeks? Is that what it was?
Two-ish? Let's go with 2-ish.
Okay.
So I have one more question for you, and this one also might be a little uncomfortable, but it's not really specific to Firebase. It's not specific to Firebase. It has to do with young tech companies, and you guys have been around since 2012, and the risk of a young tech company actually failing or pivoting or being bought, it's really high. Like Google's famous for this, buying out a company and then shutting down the service. You guys are bigger than you would expect for an acqui-hire, or at least your numbers kind of indicate that. But there's always a risk for developers, other startups, even bigger companies that want to rely on a young service. And one answer to that is to open source the platform and have a simple data migration strategy to and from the hosted service. Do you guys have a position as a company on that topic?
Well, first I'll say that I don't think we're going anywhere. We're very well funded, and we have a very large customer base. So we're doing quite well. And we want to continue to build out features for developers. Secondly, the data that you store in Firebase is just as easily backed up from Firebase through any number of means. You can use the real-time API, or you can use our RESTful JSON API to basically download all the data that you currently have, so that it is ultimately your data as a developer. So there are no restrictions on pulling that data that you've stored in Firebase.
So that covers the data migration piece of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of open sourcing our internal infrastructure, what we have done is we've open sourced our client libraries, so like the JavaScript clients, and we continue to open source like portions of our infrastructure, but ultimately it's not something that's completely open source right now.
You didn't yell at us and scream and say, hell no. So that's an awesome answer. There are, actually, Firebase on GitHub does have quite a few open source projects there I've seen.
Yeah, and part of that stuff is sort of portions of our key infrastructure or our clients.
Giving away some of the ingredients, but not the secret sauce in there. Pretty nice. So, yeah, thank you for coming on. Is there anything you want to share with our listeners out there of how they can get involved with static applications or the Firebase hosting, or even contributing on GitHub, or anything semi-related or unrelated if you want? Anything you want to plug?
Well, you guys, thank you for asking about open data sets. I think it's a great way to introduce developers to Firebase, because this data is interesting, and I'd love to see more visualizations and more use of it. As a developer, if you're interested in getting started with Firebase, I would suggest checking out our tutorial. Just go to firebase.com/tutorial. It's like a 5-minute tutorial that'll walk you through building a chat app from scratch with only client-side code. And then we're always happy to receive pull requests on any of our GitHub projects, or come hang out with us on the RIC channel or on Firebase, the Firebase Talk Google group. We love to hear from developers and love to get their feedback.
And are you guys on Freenode, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Firebase on Freenode.
If anybody, any of our listeners want to, contact you for further information on anything we've talked about, what's the best way they can find you?
They are welcome to send me an email. It's Ossama@firebase.com. That's with 2 S's. So OSSAMA@firebase.com.
And Christian, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about quickly?
No, I think we covered a pretty broad spectrum. So
yeah, I totally
thank you
cut you
very
off,
much for joining with us. There, it was great conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening, everybody.
This episode comes to you, at least in part, through the support and sound equipment generously supplied by 3 Pillar Global. 3 Pillar is a software product development company in Fairfax, Virginia, and 3 Pillar is a leader in creating purposeful and innovative product experiences. 3 Pillar was recently named to the Washington Post Top Workplaces list for 2014. So if you want to follow 3 Pillar on the Twitters, it's @3PillarGlobal. And to find out more and see current job openings, please visit 3pillarglobal.com. That's 3, the number, pillarglobal.com. Thank you.